Hi guys. Okay, today we are answering the question, how does saddle fit affect your horse's ability to be supple? A lot of talk about suppleness right now on our page because we have our Suppling Masterclass, which actually starts today. If you're watching us live, starts today, September 14th. And so we wanted to answer this question about how saddle fit affects suppling, and just kind of a couple different questions around that same question. I want to show you a couple of the muscles that are affected most commonly by saddle fit, and I'm not sure how many of you know this, but I'm actually a certified equine massage therapist. It's one of the courses that I took when I was a student at Meredith Manor, and I didn't have any intention to become a massage therapist. I just wanted to take the program so that I'd have a more in-depth understanding of the horse's muscles and anatomy, so that I could have that knowledge moving forward as a trainer, a coach. Now that we're selling Bob saddles, it's kind of coming in handy again. But I want to show you a couple of the muscles in the horse that are affected most commonly by saddle fit, because that is going to answer a lot of the questions around how saddle fit affects suppling. It's actually quite simple. Before I do that, do you have anything really brilliant that you want to say about how saddle fit affects your horse's ability to supple or just to work in general, based on what you see?
Well, I think it's just so important because there's nothing worse than back pain in a human or a horse, so it's so important to get them fitted right and feeling right. Nothing worse than a sore back.
Okay, so I want to show you, this is RM Electric Checks. She's our model for today, and I just want to show you, I'm not sure if you can get this camera angle up in here, but this is her spine here, and this horse is really well muscled. So you can see that she has muscle coverage on both sides of her spine here. Her spine comes down here, rib cage. These muscles are up on top of the rib cage. And there's two muscles. They start here at the withers and they run down like this, and then they insert up here, up at the top of her hip in the sacral iliac area. And one of them is a little bit more superficial, one of them is a little bit deeper. So there's one that's kind of like that, and then there's one that runs underneath of that, and you can really only see a little bit of it, kind of like that. And those two long muscles are the muscles that are affected the most by a poor saddle fit. So they're really, really long and they're really lean, which means that if there's any tension anywhere through the muscle, it's really going to show up. You've also got the ribs right underneath there. So there's not a lot of place for tension or swelling to go. It kind of gets into those muscles, and then it usually sits somewhere in the middle towards the end of those muscles. So you've got those two muscles, the longissimus dorsi, longissimus costrum along there. Then you've also got the trapezius, which kind of comes like this. If you can kind of imagine up like that. Obviously is going to be affected by saddle fit quite a lot. And then you've got under here, we've got the pectoral muscles that run right along here. Obviously going to have, you're obviously going to have a lot of issues in the pectoral muscles, especially if you have a poorly fitted cinch. So those are the main ones that are affected by saddle fit. And then if we look at the horse's body in terms of suppling, what we're asking our horse to do essentially is to engage all of the muscles across the top line. I started from the head and worked back. I should have started from the back and worked forward. But we're asking for them to engage right from here all the way across through these muscles, across these muscles. We want them to be lifting up their back, using their abdominals and lifting up their back. We want them to be using the muscles up across the top part of the neck rather than down in here. And if we're asking them to engage those muscles, we're asking them essentially to go like that. If there's something here on the saddle that's pushing in, they're just straight up not going to want to do it. It's going to be uncomfortable for them. So you could be doing everything right in how you're asking your horse to supple, but if there's discomfort in here, then your horse is going to have some kind of resistance to doing it. And that can show up in a lot of different ways. It can show up in trying to go sideways. They might try to push their body out. They might try to go forward. A lot of horses, you know, especially like Arabs or thoroughbreds will try to go forward, try to get up away from it. And other horses will just kind of hunker down, just kind of shut down, hunker down, and not want to go forward. And that's where you'll see things like bucking or balking. So that, just understanding that muscle chain and those three groups of muscles that are affected mostly by saddle fit, that's kind of it's almost like a no-brainer, right? It's like, oh, okay, well, if they're sore in there, then they're probably not going to want to supple. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, and then I'll ask you to talk a little bit about shoulders and what happens when there's discomfort specifically in the shoulder, but and it's not so much about the fit of the saddle on the horse's back as it is the fit for the rider. A lot of saddles place the rider too far forward on the horse's back, so we're sitting too far this way. And when we're sitting too far this way, not only are we adding to the amount of weight on the front end of the horse, but we're also, we also have a harder time controlling and influencing the back end of the horse. So if we're sitting up here, we're using all of our aids right up in here, it's really hard to get the horse mentally to connect to their hind end. Whereas if we're sitting right in the middle of the horse's back, then it's quite easy for us to access the back end and ask it to engage or, you know, move the hip in or whatever it is that we're trying to do with our suppling exercise. So making sure that we're sitting truly in the center of the horse's back, and half an inch can make a huge difference there. It has a huge influence over how well we're able to ask our horses to supple. And then probably the most common thing that we see is what happens when a horse's saddle is tight on the shoulders. Did you want to talk about that for just a second? Because I know you get kind of worked up about saddles that pinch horses' shoulders.
I feel like for us and the reiners and the ranch riders and the cowboys, anytime they're sore into here, the problem is they're not going to extend them shoulders, they're not going to put those knees and ankles out there, and they're not going to be vulnerable. They're hurting, so they're just going to tighten out. And there's nothing harder than trying to fix a horse with a sore back. It takes a long time, and it's just a huge pain. A lot of them older saddles, not all of them, but a lot of the older saddles were just a little narrower through here because the horses were that way. You know, we've bred for a much stronger back through here horse over the last 40-some years, especially in the reiners and the horses that we use. So the horse or the saddles are just a little different built. Whenever they're sore right here in the shoulders, it's gonna just transfer over. They hate their job, so they're not gonna work. And for us, that's such a big thing, is they have to. The way our judges, or the way our shows are judged anymore, attitude and willingness and all that stuff. It doesn't matter if you have the longest stop. It's the willingness, the attitude to go into them. So they have to be sound and healthy and wanting to participate.
Yeah, and I think just one more thing as you're talking about the shoulders and you're kind of touching and feeling up here, a lot of people think that the shoulders are kind of down in here. And if you learn equine anatomy, the point of the shoulder is right here. But the shoulder runs right up here and kind of around like this. Kind of around like that. So it's kind of shaped like that. And that up there is the scapula. So the same as the shoulder blade on the human, where you've got those big bones that are almost like plates that kind of stick out. The scapula on the horse is right up in here. So you can imagine, when you kind of imagine your own scapula, you can imagine how uncomfortable that is if you've got pinching there. If you've got a saddle that pinches there, which a lot do, they push right in there. And how uncomfortable it would be to move when every time you move your shoulder, something's pinching right into that bone. Do we have any questions about that as we've been going along, or is that kind of making sense to everybody? If you do have questions, you're welcome to leave them here for us. If you're watching us live, then that's fantastic. If you're watching the replay, we'll try to swing back and make sure that you do get those questions answered. And thank you for sending that question in, because that was a really, really good question to ask. If you have a question for a future live that you'd like to send in, you can send it in to us at hazecofelph@gmail.com. You can leave it for us on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or wherever you're finding us, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. We are about to start our Suppling Masterclass, so there's some theory, kind of like this, but more about the training of the horse and the elements that the horse has to be able to do in order to become truly supple. We look at what the term suppleness actually means, and we're going in depth there with the theory, and then I'm teaching you three exercises that have 2 parts each, and we're spending the next 6 weeks making sure that you know not just what the exercises are, but actually how to do them, because how you perform the exercise is so much more important than just winging it, right? So there's loads and loads of support in there. Really excited about the group that we have. If you are interested in participating, you can still get in. Send me a message and I will get you that info.
So we want to mention about saddle fitting doesn't matter when you don't have a saddle pad on?
Sure, go for it.
For me, when I see people look at saddles, the fad is to put the saddle on the saddle pad, but in our Western saddles, we don't have English word flocking. We don't have the padding on our Western saddles. We ride in a saddle pad. So we can change how a saddle fits, whether we use a 1-inch pad or a 1/2-inch thick pad, whatever. It's more important that it fits when the saddle pad is underneath it and when the rider is on top. I think you got to put the whole thing together.
Yeah, your saddle pad is going to add a little bit of width. So you want to make sure that you're fitting your saddle with whatever pad you're going to be riding on it. That's a good point. And your pad can make a difference. If you don't have a saddle that's fitting your horse just perfectly, sometimes you can use a saddle that will, or a pad, sorry, that will hide some of the flaws of a poor saddle fit. It's not ideal. Obviously, it's a temporary fix or an inexpensive fix until you can get into a saddle that fits properly, but your pad can definitely make a big difference. Okay, thanks for being here today, you guys, and let us know what other questions you have so that we can get them answered on a future Facebook Live Q&A.